here's the deal. We want to talk about families and ethics. I don't want to do that. I mean, his family we could talk about all night. His family's already...
My family lost a fortune by coming down and helping us with government.
All right, joining us now to respond, President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr. We both COVID tested.
We've been tested. I don't want to get. They'll throw us in the gulag.
Where's my mask?
Close, so.
Yeah. All right, so you're sitting in here. I'm watching it. Look, I understand. I grew up. I played hockey. We dropped the gloves every day. Some people probably think it's too hot.
Yeah.
But it was both sides.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I look at your dad, and my take is, well, if he didn't fight back against the deep state, if he didn't fight for the money for the wall, if China and Japan and Mexico and our Western European allies and Canada didn't believe that he meant it on trade deals, they wouldn't have happened.
What about peace in the Middle East, Sean? That happened not because of people like Joe Biden who have been in government for 47 years, but because Donald Trump took a different approach, and when he said he's going to do something, they believed him. So, it was obviously combative, but I think you also have to look, and the American people have to understand, what Donald Trump has been through, the impeachment hoax, Russia collusion nonsense. There's actual Russia collusion now. That literally wire transfers from a known associate of Vladimir Putin to Joe Biden's son. There's a first lady of Moscow. She happens to be a billionaire, but guess what? You don't become a billionaire first lady of Moscow without connections to Vladimir Putin. Now it's there. For 4 years, I get to hear about me. That's something they were hoping that I did a fraction of what Hunter did. I'd be in jail right now.
You had one meeting and you spent 3 years of your life.
Now paid for by the DNC. Acknowledged. The FBI was working with a known Russian agent, a known spy. And it's like, oh, now we don't want to hear anything about it. So, if there's a combative nature where you come out hot of the bunch, it's because he's had to deal with it. He's had to watch his family be subjected to it. He had to be subjected to himself. And by the way, more importantly, he still delivered for the American people because that was the reality. Joe Biden couldn't answer what he's done for 47 years. Joe Biden talks about race. That's wonderful. What did he do about it? Nothing. You talked about what he did. You talked about his statements, his comments. Donald Trump is the guy that got president reform done. Alice Johnson was one of our guests tonight. She flew over here with us today. One of the first people.
Don Jr., criminal justice reform. He got opportunity zones, historically black colleges, police reform, record low unemployment, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment. And I thought one of the most powerful lines of the night, too, was on COVID. Joe, if he would have listened to you, you were afraid you were calling the travel ban 10 days after the first case of corona.
100%. It was racist. I mean, at what point in time was it racist to shut down travel from the epicenter of a deadly viral outbreak? Any other place that I've ever known, Sean, that would be called common sense. But Joe can't get out of the way of the woke mob. He has to try to appease them. It's why he couldn't do anything about police officers. It's why he couldn't, and the DNC and no Democrat said anything about the violence going on in these cities because they don't want to upset their base. And that's really problematic.
How does it go over with him actually denying the Biden-Bernie, Bolshevik-Bernie manifesto, which he agreed to?
Well, beyond that, I mean, they talk about the Green New Deal. They'll say, well, it was $93 trillion, not the $100 trillion that my father had said. I mean, that's the reality. That's how these things will be fact-checked. They'll say, well, Trump wasn't strong enough on white supremacy. I mean, he denounced everything, first of all, right there. More importantly, he literally, for the first American president, made the KKK a domestic hate, terrorist organization last week.
Right.
So, they will spin that, but they will neglect the facts, and that's the point. If I did what Hunter did, I'd be in jail, but that's not a fact. If our FBI did this to an incoming President Barack Obama or an incoming Joe Biden, it would be the biggest scandal in American political history. When it happens to Trump, that's okay, because we don't like Trump. We don't want someone who's actually going to be effective. We don't want someone who's actually going to take us out of these wars, these endless wars. The things that Joe Biden would push us for. Tax policy that is asinine. Joe Biden made the tax policy. They want to give Donald Trump a hard time for playing by their rules. It's ridiculous.
I always said that America knew what they were electing in your dad in 2016.
Yeah.
That is an iconoclast, somebody that is not part of the swamp, somebody that is there to break down the system. This is what draining the swamp looks like, and it's not pretty, is it?
It's not, and the swamp has teeth, as we found out. I mean, look at what they've tried to do to him throughout. Look at all the lies. Everyone's running with anonymous sources. I've seen more anonymous source stuff that falls and gets debunked after they get 1 week to run with the story as though it's the gospel. That's the real problem. And so, if there is a frustration where my father then comes out aggressively, it's because they've been doing this for 4 years. They talk about a peaceful transition of power. the American Republic has existed for 243 years. Obama and Biden were the first people to not have a peaceful transition of power. They tried to weaponize their friends in government and the highest levels of American law enforcement to try to combat this president, the duly elected president of the United States. They're playing games with ballots all over the place. You saw it in Pennsylvania. You saw the O'Keefe stuff. And we're supposed to pretend like it doesn't happen because the Democrats control the media, so they won't highlight very obvious things. Just like, again, they're not going to highlight Hunter's connection to Xi and China governmental investment. They're not going to talk about him being tied to money to Putin and human trafficking and prostitution rings. That's off limits. It's the kind of stuff, if I did a fraction of it, it would be the biggest scandal. It would be the biggest story for weeks. It would single-handedly disqualify my father from being there because the media would say, 100 does it. It's like, no big deal. It's not really a problem. It's okay for him.
Things evolve in a country. Things evolve in, we supposedly celebrate free speech in this country. Why would I be very interested in put the two candidates on the stage for 2 hours and let them go at it? Let them take it on.
I think it'd be great. Listen, we've seen that. We knew that was coming anyway with Chris Wallace. I understand he's a Fox guy, but he's no conservative. He's going to be, and he's no centrist either. That's sort of the nature of this game, and I think that's why my father has to play it that way. He's got to combat that because he's not just fighting conservative ideas versus liberal ideas. I mean, he's taking on a multi-billion-dollar mainstream media complex. Joe Biden can hide in the basement. He doesn't have to get out and do campaign rallies. The media will do that for him. He can sit there for months and do a debate prep because no one's going to ask him a question as to why he's not taking any questions.
How do you get away with not answering whether you're stacked the court or not?
Because you know what the answer is. He knows what the answer is, so he doesn't want to line out for when he eventually does it. But it's no secret. They say, Amy Coney, she's the reason they're now talking about this. They were talking about this 2 months ago before Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And Donald Trump was right. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said the president is the president for 4 years, not a fraction of that, not 3 years. He's the president for 4 years, so he should fill the court.
By Biden, because he's like, well, you have to have an election. Well, we had an election.
Correct.
He's the president. It's happened 29 times
his
in election years.
Well, you're in an election year. It's like, so you mean he's not the president till January, whatever it is?
Right.
Well, of course he is. So it's an asinine answer. But again, no one's going to call him out on that very real fact. There are people watching in America right now that think, oh, well, because of an election, that's different. Like you're only partially president because you're in an election year. That it's ridiculous, but by not contesting it, but by not saying, well, that's not how it works. That's not how the Constitution written. By the way, that's not what Obama said. That's not what Biden said. It's not what Ginsburg said. It's not what Schumer said. It's not what Pelosi said in 2016 with Merrick Garland. The difference is they didn't control the Senate and they didn't have the votes.
How do you feel as we now see all of these instances? I mean, and it seems to be every swing state. We have issues in Pennsylvania. We have issues in North Carolina. We have issues in Wisconsin as it relates to, let's change the rules.
Yeah.
Let's extend out the days in which we'll actually count votes.
Well, it's a big problem. It's happening in all of the states that have Democrat control, right? Because that's how they play their games. They don't have a ground game. They haven't bothered to try to staff that up. They haven't done door knocking. They don't have to. Their plan is to start all of this on November 4th, when they can start just litigating it, contesting it, and in places like Pennsylvania where you have a Democrat governor and a Democrat state legislator, that's why it was so critical for my father to say, hey, you guys got to get out there and vote. This has to be a landslide. If it's in the margins, these guys are going to play games. Ballots are going to be coming in for weeks and probably months afterwards. They will magically all be 100% for Joe Biden because we've seen how this works. We've seen this game play out too many times.
Amazing
the Republicans don't win special elections once they go past.
Amazing how Pennsylvania, every ballot was cast for your dad that was in the garbage pan.
Yeah, from the military. And again, that doesn't mean, but the notion also that absentee balloting is perfect. Well, this isn't absentee balloting. Mailing states that have never done this before, doing a dry run with literally hundreds of millions of potential ballots, that's not the same as an absentee ballot system like you have in Florida that has worked for years. There are differences, but they try to take and conflate the issues. They try to say, oh, no, well, it works in Florida. Yeah, in a system that's been tried and proven and tested. The Democrats don't want the signatures to have to match up on ballots across the country. Please explain to me, give me one reason, Sean, one reason why the signature of the person who's saying they're voting, who's registered to vote, should not have to match, unless you're trying to steal the election, which of course they are.
In 2016, when I went to the DNC convention, I needed a photo ID.
Yeah.
And usually I'd go there, the guys would say, hi, Mr. Hannity.
Well, you're obviously
I need
racist,
your ID.
You're obviously racist. I mean, that's their answer for everything. I mean, it's asinine. Okay, I mean, if you can't
A
figure
lot
out how
of
to get an
states.
ID in this country, it's one of the easiest things in the world.
It is the biggest choice election this country has faced. I gotta let you go. I appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you very much.
Elbows out, right?
You will, man.
I throw my, anyway, long story.
Don't knock me
Good to
out
see you.
yet.
All right, coming up, a lot more to cover from tonight's presidential debate. Judge Janine Pirro, Mercedes.